The night Paige Sullivan asked me to kiss her, I was standing in my sister's kitchen with a bag of frozen peas pressed against my knuckles, and I remember thinking, this is the strangest request anyone has ever made to a man holding frozen vegetables. My name is Noah Bennett. I'm 29, I fix motorcycles for a living, and up until that night, Paige had been exactly one thing to me for 11 years, my sister's best friend. Nothing more. Nothing less. She'd been at every birthday party since middle school, every holiday dinner, every ordinary Tuesday when she just showed up because our house felt more like home than her own. She was furniture. Good furniture. The kind you don't notice until somebody tries to move it. That night, my sister Casey was hosting one of her dinner things, the kind where she invites 6 people and ends up cooking for 12 because she can't say no to anybody. I'd come by to fix a cabinet hinge that had been driving her insane for a month, and I was still in my work clothes when Paige walked in the back door, laughing at something on her phone, hair down, wearing a green sweater that made her look like she belonged in a magazine ad for a life I didn't have. She saw me kneeling by the cabinet and grinned. Look at you. Handyman of the year. It's a hinge, Paige. Not a rescue mission. Still counts. She dropped her bag on the counter and leaned against it, watching me work like it was the most interesting thing happening in the house. That wasn't new. Paige had always watched me the way you watch weather, casual, curious, no real stakes attached. What was new came about 2 hours later. Dinner had wrapped up. Casey was in the living room arguing with her husband about whether the dishwasher was loaded correctly, which was apparently a topic that required volume. I was on the back porch getting air, my hand throbbing from where I'd smashed it against the cabinet frame like an idiot, and Paige followed me out with a bag of frozen peas she'd grabbed from the freezer without asking. Here. She pressed it into my hand. Before you pretend you're fine. I am fine. You're holding your hand like it's a small dying animal. She sat down on the porch step beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched, and for a while neither of us said anything. Crickets going in the yard. Porch light buzzing overhead. The kind of quiet that feels comfortable until it doesn't. Then she said, out of absolutely nowhere, "Can I ask you something weird?" "You already are. Might as well finish the job." She laughed, but it faded fast, and when she looked at me again, something in her face had changed. Less playful. More careful. "Danny's getting married next month." I knew the name. Danny Reyes, her ex from college, the one who'd strung her along for 2 years before deciding he wasn't ready, then turned around 6 months later and got engaged to somebody else. Paige had cried about it exactly once in front of me at Casey's old apartment, and then never mentioned it again. That was Paige. She didn't perform pain. She just filed it away somewhere private and kept moving. "I heard," I said carefully. "You okay?" "I don't know." She picked at the label on the peas bag. "I'm going to the wedding." Casey talked me into it. Something about closure and not letting him win by hiding. Sounds like Casey. It does. She let out a breath. The thing is, I keep imagining walking in there alone, and everyone looking at me like I'm the sad ex who never moved on, and She stopped herself, shook her head like she was annoyed at her own sentence. "This is stupid. Try me." She looked at me for a long second, like she was deciding whether I'd earned the rest of it. Then she said, "I don't want to walk in there looking like nobody's ever wanted me since him. I want to walk in there like a woman who's been kissed properly at least once since college and knows the difference." I sat very still. "Paige, I'm not asking you to date me, Noah. I'm not even asking you to like it." Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "I just need to know what it feels like. So when I walk into that wedding, I'm not carrying around this quiet fear that Danny was as good as it gets. I need it to be a lie I actually know is a lie." I stared at her a long moment. The porch light buzzed. Somewhere inside, Casey was still losing the dishwasher argument. "You're asking me to kiss you," I said slowly, "so you can survive your ex's wedding. When you say it like that, it sounds insane." "It is insane." "I know." She looked down at her hands. "Forget I said anything." She started to stand up, and something in me moved faster than my better judgment. I caught her wrist, gently, and she stopped. "I didn't say no," I said. She sat back down slowly, like she wasn't sure she'd heard me right. You didn't say yes either. I'm getting there. My heart was doing something stupid and fast in my chest, and I told myself it was nerves about the whole ridiculous situation, not anything else. Not anything about the green sweater or the way she was looking at me like I was the only steady thing on the porch. If I do this, it's once. Just once. And it doesn't get weird between us after. It won't. You don't know that. No, she admitted. But I'd rather risk weird with you than walk into that wedding empty. I should have said no. I want that on record. I had 11 years of history telling me this was a bad idea. A best friend's best friend, borrowed trust. A favor that could break something that wasn't mine to break. But there was also this. Paige Sullivan sitting 3 inches away from me with her guard down for maybe the first time since I'd known her, asking for something honest instead of performing fine like she always did. Okay, I said. Once. Her breath caught just slightly. Then she leaned in and I met her halfway, and for about 4 seconds the whole porch, the crickets, the buzzing light, Casey's voice through the screen door, all of it went quiet in a way I wasn't prepared for. It was not a friendly kiss. I want to be clear about that. It was not 2 people testing something out of curiosity and walking away unaffected. When she pulled back, her eyes were wide, and her hand had somehow found its way to my jaw without either of us deciding it should be there. Oh, she said quietly. That was not what I expected. What did you expect? Something safe. Something I could file under favor and move on from. She pulled her hand back slowly, like she was surprised to find it there at all. That wasn't safe. My pulse was still going too fast. No, I agreed. It wasn't. We sat there in silence for a long moment, both of us pretending to look at the yard instead of each other. Then the back door opened and Casey stuck her head out, completely oblivious, holding a dish towel like a flag of surrender. He loaded it wrong, I loaded it right, we're at a truce, she announced. Then she squinted at the 2 of us sitting there, too still, too quiet. You 2 okay? Fine, Paige said too fast. Frozen peas emergency, I added, holding up the bag like evidence. Casey gave us a look that said she wasn't buying it but didn't have the energy to investigate, and went back inside. Paige let out a breath and stood up. I should go, she said. Thank you. For that. She stopped, searching for a word, and didn't find one she liked. I'll see you around, Noah. She left before I could say anything else, and I sat on that porch for another 20 minutes with peas melting in my hand, trying to figure out what had just happened to my life. For the next 2 weeks, we didn't talk. Not really. A few texts here and there, the kind that skimmed the surface on purpose. How's the shop? Did Casey ever forgive her husband about the dishwasher? Nothing about the porch. Nothing about the 4 seconds that had rearranged something in my chest without asking permission first. I told myself that was fine. That was the deal. Once, no weirdness, back to normal. I was a grown man who could compartmentalize a single kiss from a woman I'd known half my life. I was very good at lying to myself, apparently. The wedding was on a Saturday. Paige texted me the morning of, a short message that said only, wish me luck. I stared at that text longer than any reasonable person stares at 4 words, then wrote back, you don't need it. You'll walk in there like you own the place. She sent back a single heart, and then nothing else all day. I told myself I wasn't waiting for an update. I told myself that around 4 separate times while doing absolutely nothing productive at the shop, staring at a motorcycle engine like it owed me answers. She called that night, close to 10. I picked up before the second ring, which told me everything about how well my compartmentalizing was actually going. Hey, she said. Her voice sounded tired in a way that wasn't entirely bad. How was it? Strange. I heard her exhale, long and slow, like she was finally letting go of something she'd been holding all day. Danny looked happy. His wife seems nice. Everyone kept looking at me like they expected me to cry into the cake. Did you? No. A small laugh. I danced with his uncle, ate 2 plates of food I didn't need, and left before the bouquet toss because I refused to give anyone that satisfaction. Sounds like a win. It was. A pause stretched out on the line, long enough that I could hear the sound of her car, the hum of the engine, somewhere quiet, Then she said, quieter, "No, can I tell you something? Always. I kept thinking about you. Not Danny. Not the wedding. On the porch." Her voice had lost its careful edge. I told myself the kiss was going to be this one clean, contained thing I could use and set down. But I haven't been able to set it down. It's been sitting in my chest for 2 weeks like a splinter I don't actually want removed. My hand tightened around the phone. "Paige. I'm not asking you for anything," she said quickly, the old defensive reflex kicking back in. "I just needed to say it out loud to somebody. And you're the somebody it's about, so." I sat down on the edge of my bed, staring at nothing. "I haven't set it down either." Silence on the line. Then, carefully, "What does that mean?" "It means I've replayed 4 seconds of a porch kiss more times than I've replayed anything in my entire life, and I keep telling myself it's because it was unexpected, and I know that's not the real reason." I closed my eyes. "The real reason is I've been looking at you for 11 years the way you look at furniture you've stopped noticing, and apparently my brain decided that particular night was the moment to notice all over again." Her breath caught audibly through the phone. "Say that again. Slower." "I like you, Paige. Not in a best friend's little brother way. Not in a favor way. I think I've liked you for longer than either of us wants to admit, and the kiss just knocked the dust off something that was already there." She didn't say anything for a long moment, long enough that I started to panic I'd said too much, wrecked something that had been simple and safe for over a decade. Then she said, "I'm turning my car around." "What?" "I'm 20 minutes from your place. I'm turning around." Her voice had a shake in it, but not a scared one. An awake one. "I need to see your face when you say that again. Paige, it's 10 at night, you just left a wedding?" "Noah." Her voice cut through, "Steady now. Turn your porch light on." I hung up, stood there staring at my phone for exactly 3 seconds, then went and flipped the porch light on like a man waiting for something he didn't fully believe was coming. 22 minutes later, her headlights swept across my driveway. She got out of the car still in her wedding guest dress, dark blue, heels in one hand because she'd apparently taken them off to drive, hair a little wild from the wind through the window. She walked up my driveway like a woman who'd made a decision somewhere around mile marker 12 and wasn't interested in reversing it. "Say it again," she said, stopping a few feet from me on the porch steps. "I like you. More than the kiss. More than the favor. More than both of those things combined." I took a step closer. "I've liked you since before I had the nerve to admit it to myself, and I think some stupid part of me has been waiting for a reason as ridiculous as frozen peas and a wedding favor to finally say it." Her eyes were bright, and for a second I thought she might cry, but instead she laughed, short and disbelieving, the sound of someone who'd been braced for a different answer her whole life and didn't know what to do with a good one. "I asked you to kiss me because I didn't want to be scared walking into that wedding," she said. "I didn't expect the kiss to be the thing that scared me more than Danny ever did." "Scared how?" "Scared because it was real, Noah. It wasn't practice. It wasn't a favor. It felt like something I'd been avoiding for years without knowing it had a name." She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the mascara smudged faintly under one eye from a long day of pretending she was fine. "And I spent this entire wedding, every single dance, every conversation, every bite of cake, thinking about a porch instead of the man I used to love." My chest went tight in the good way, the way that doesn't happen often enough to trust immediately. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want once anymore." Her voice dropped, softer, sure. "I want to know what it's like when it's not a favor. When it's just us, no wedding to survive, no excuse to hide behind." I reached out and tucked a piece of wind-tangled hair behind her ear, the same motion I'd probably wanted to make 100 times over 11 years without ever letting myself notice the wanting. "Then let's find out," I said. This time, when I kissed her, there was no bag of frozen peas, no dishwasher argument through a screen door, no excuse of a wedding hanging over either of our heads. It was slower. Sure. The kind of kiss that isn't trying to prove anything to an ex-boyfriend 3 towns over, just 2 people finally admitting what had been sitting quietly between them for over a decade. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine and laughed softly. "Casey's going to lose her mind." Casey's going to say she called it in the 3rd grade. She absolutely will. Paige pulled back enough to look at me properly, eyes soft in the porch light. Are you sure about this? Because once we tell her, once this becomes real outside of a porch at 10 at night, there's no quiet undo button. I don't want an undo button, I said. I've had 11 years of watching you walk in and out of my life like you belong there, and I never once had the nerve to ask you to stay for a reason that wasn't a favor. I'm not letting that happen again. She smiled, the real one, the one she didn't perform for anybody, and reached for my hand like it was something she'd been meaning to do for a very long time and had simply been waiting for the right excuse. We told Casey 2 days later, over coffee in her kitchen, the same kitchen where the whole thing had technically started with a broken hinge and a bag of frozen peas. Casey stared at us for a full 10 seconds, looked at Paige, looked at me, and then said, completely deadpan, I give it a week before you two are insufferable. We're already insufferable, Paige said, and I didn't argue. 6 months later, Paige moved a box of her things into my place, not all at once, just slowly, the way real things tend to happen instead of the dramatic all-or-nothing version people expect. A coffee mug here. A jacket on my hook by the door. A toothbrush that stopped feeling like an intrusion and started feeling like it had always belonged there. One evening, sitting on that same back porch where it all started, she looked over at me and said, you know, if Danny hadn't gotten married, none of this happens. Probably not. That's a strange thing to be grateful for. I reached over and took her hand, the same one that had rested against my jaw 11 years and 1 lifetime-changing porch conversation ago. I'm not grateful for Danny, I said. I'm grateful you had the guts to ask for something honest instead of pretending you were fine. Most people don't do that. Most people don't get frozen peas and a life-altering kiss in the same night, she said, smiling against her coffee cup. No, I agreed. That part was just us. We got married the following spring, a small ceremony in Casey's backyard, close enough to the porch that you could still see it from where we stood saying our vows. During the reception, Casey stood up with a glass in her hand and said, in front of everyone, I have never in my life seen 2 people take the long way around something so obvious. 11 years, you two. 11 years and a bag of frozen peas. Everyone laughed. Paige squeezed my hand under the table and leaned in close enough that only I could hear her. Once, she whispered, echoing the word from that very first night. You said once. I lied, I whispered back. I meant every day after that too. She kissed me right there, in front of everyone, no favor attached, no wedding to survive, nothing to prove to anybody watching. Just 2 people who'd finally stopped pretending that something safe was the same thing as something real. Would you have said yes if your sister's best friend asked you to kiss her just once? And have you ever asked for something small, thinking it was harmless, only to have it turn into the biggest thing that ever happened to you? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.